Edith Dalton came running through the dust with one torn glove, one muddy valise, and a bank draft sewn inside her dress while half the town watched Alvin Vaughn's dying ranch get posted for sale. Men leaned against hitching rails and called her another runaway bride, the kind who brought trouble cheaper than rain. Alvin stood beside the auction notice with grief carved deep under his hat, too proud to beg, too tired to hope, and too wounded to believe a plain stranger could save anything he had lost. But Edith looked past the whispers, past the shame on her own name, and saw a ranch still breathing. Before the dust rises, write your country in the comments so I know where this story found you. If you enjoy lonely cowboys, brave women, and love that heals old wounds, subscribe for the next tale. The auction notice had been nailed crooked to the post outside Hargrove's general store, but every word on it was straight enough to kill a man. Vaughn Ranch to be sold for debt. Edith Dalton read it with dust on her lips and a bitter taste of fear sitting under her tongue. Her train dress was gray from travel, her hem torn where she had jumped from a wagon 3 miles outside of town, and one side of her bonnet hung loose by a single ribbon. In her hand she held a valise that looked almost empty. In truth, it carried only a comb, a Bible, a folded change of underclothes, and a letter that had brought her west under a lie. The true weight of her fortune was hidden elsewhere, sewn into a narrow pocket beneath the lining of her bodice, where every heartbeat pressed it against her ribs. The town of Mercy Bend watched her, as if she had climbed out of the dust instead of walking into it. A barber paused with a razor in his hand. 2 women on the boardwalk turned their parasols just enough to look without seeming to look. A freckled boy stood with a licorice stick hanging from his mouth. By the hitching rail, a tall man in a black hat stared at the auction notice like he could burn it down by silence alone. That was Alvin Vaughn. Edith knew his name because she had heard it hissed by the driver who had dropped her near town. Vaughn Place is ruined, the driver had said. His wife died, his cattle thinned, his wells failing. Man's got more sorrow than land now. If you came here for him, you came too late. She had not come for him. Not exactly. She had come because a letter from Mercy Bend had promised marriage, shelter, and a decent life if she arrived quiet and grateful. The letter had been signed by a widower named Silas Greer, who owned a feedlot and claimed to need a wife for his 2 motherless girls. He had written that he did not mind if Edith was plain, older than 25, and without family connections. He had written that a woman with no demands would suit him. Edith should have burned the letter then. But back east, after her aunt died, and the boarding house locked its door behind her, a woman without family could become invisible faster than smoke. Edith had answered. She had boarded the train. She had carried with her the secret inheritance nobody believed she deserved. A fortune left by an old employer who said Edith had been the only soul who treated him kindly before death. By the time she reached Kansas City, Silas Greer had found out about the money. By the time she reached Mercy Bend, she had run. Now Silas stood in front of Hargrove's general store, with a red face, a silver watch chain, and 2 men beside him who looked paid to obey. There she is, he said. Every head turned. Edith's stomach tightened. She looked for escape, and found none but the open street, wide and cruel beneath the noon sun. Silas stepped down from the boardwalk. Miss Dalton, you made me chase you clear from the station. That is no way for a promised bride to behave. I promised nothing after you searched my trunk, Edith said, though her voice shook. A murmur moved through the crowd. Silas smiled as if she had amused him. A man has a right to know what manner of woman he is bringing into his home. You had no right to break the lock. And you had no right to hide what belongs in a household once you marry into it. Edith clutched the valise handle until her fingers hurt. I will not marry you. The words came out clear enough to make the barber lower his razor and the boy drop his licorice. Silas' smile thinned. Then you will repay the travel expenses, the station fee, the dress money I sent, and the room I prepared, with interest. I never received dress money. You received my offer. That is worth something. A few men laughed. Edith felt heat rise in her face. Dust stuck to the sweat at her temple. She had endured pity before, and indifference, and the soft cruelty of women who believed poverty was a stain that could rub off on them. But public shame had a special edge. It turned every breath into a sound too loud. Then Silas saw where she was standing. His gaze moved from Edith to the auction notice, then to Alvin Vaughn. "Well now," Silas said. "A runaway bride and a ruined rancher. Mercy Bend does know how to put its broken things in one place." Alvin's head turned slowly. He was not young, not in the boyish way some cowboys were. His face held weather, grief, and a beard that had not seen careful trimming in days. His coat was sun-faded at the shoulders. One glove had a split knuckle, yet there was something steady in him, something that made the crowd shift when his eyes settled on Silas. "That your business, Greer?" Alvin asked. Silas gave a short laugh. "Everything in this town is my business when money is owed." Alvin looked back at the auction notice, then read your own name on that paper and leave the woman out of it. Edith followed his gaze. At the bottom of the notice, in smaller writing, was the name of the creditor, Silas Greer. Her breath caught. Silas owned the debt on Vaughn Ranch. Silas had sent for her. Silas had tried to search her trunk. And now Silas stood ready to claim both a woman and a ranch with the same hungry smile. Edith felt the hidden bank draft against her ribs. Enough money to buy freedom. Enough money to vanish. Enough money, perhaps, to stop the auction notice from becoming a grave marker. But money shown in public could become a rope. She had learned that quickly. Alvin noticed her looking at the notice. His expression hardened not at her but at the eyes turning between them, measuring them, pairing them, judging how little each seemed to have. "You ought to go inside the store," he said to her. Out of the sun, it was not warm, it was not tender. It sounded like a man giving instructions to a stray horse blocking the road. Edith lifted her chin. "I am not fainting. I did not say you were. You looked like you thought I might. I looked like I thought Greer talks too much." That almost startled a laugh from her, but she swallowed it. Silas' men had moved closer. "Miss Dalton," Silas said, "you will come with me. No, you have no money, no room, no husband, and no reputation in this town." Edith's mouth went dry. Alvin stepped off the boardwalk. It was only one step, but the streets seemed to hear it. She said no, Alvin said. Silas' face darkened. "Careful, Vaughn. Your ranch is already on paper. Do not put your teeth on it, too." "I have lost more than land," Alvin said. "You will not scare me with paper." For the first time, Edith saw the grief in him move. It was not weakness. It was a wound that had gone deep and never closed right. A man did not speak like that, unless he had stood beside a grave and left something of himself in the dirt. Silas glanced at the crowd. Men like him liked witnesses only when they could win before them. "Fine," he said. "Let the runaway choose her company. A ruined man and a ruined woman might keep each other warm till the auction." He turned, but not before looking Edith up and down with such ownership that her skin crawled. Alvin watched him leave. Then he bent, pulled the auction notice from the post, and folded it once. "That will not stop the sale," Edith said quietly. "No," Alvin said, "but I am tired of watching folks read my funeral before I am dead." The words struck something inside her. She should have walked away. A woman with a hidden fortune and a dangerous man behind her should not attach herself to another man's trouble. She should have found the sheriff, bought a ticket, and gone anywhere. Silas Greer was not. Instead, she looked at Alvin Vaughn, at the notice clenched in his hand, at the shame he tried not to show. "How much?" she asked. He looked at her. "How much what? How much is the debt?" His eyes narrowed, suspicious now. "Too much for a woman carrying one valise and no safe place to sleep." "That is not an answer." "No, Doctor. It is a warning." Edith held his gaze. "I have had plenty of those." For a long moment, neither moved. Then Alvin tucked the folded notice into his coat. The boarding house is 2 streets over. Mrs. Pike is stern, but she locks her doors. I have no wish to be locked in. Locks can keep men out, and sometimes keep women trapped. Something changed in his face, a small recognition. Perhaps he knew what it was to feel trapped by what others called protection. He pointed toward the livery. Then I will walk behind you till you get where you are going. That sounds like following. It is if you choose to fear it. And if I choose not to, then it is keeping Greer's men honest. It was imperfect help, stiff and unsmiling, but it was help. Edith looked down at her torn glove, then at the dusty street ahead. People still watched, but not quite the same way now. She began walking. Behind her, Alvin Vaughn kept a careful distance, near enough to guard, far enough not to claim. Mrs. Pike's boarding house smelled of starch, vinegar, and old roses pressed in books. Edith stood in the front hall while the landlady looked her over with the precision of a woman pricing cloth. "No trunk?" Mrs. Pike asked. "It was left at the station. No husband. No reference." Edith hesitated. Alvin stood on the porch behind her, hat in hand, face turned slightly away, as if the whole matter embarrassed him. "She has trouble with Greer," he said. Mrs. Pike's eyes sharpened. "That is not a reference, Mr. Vaughn. That is a storm warning. It is the truth. The truth does not pay for a room." Edith reached toward the hidden pocket in her dress, then stopped herself. Not here. Not with Alvin watching. Not with Mrs. Pike's gaze so keen it could split kindling. "I can work," Edith said. "Laundry, mending, kitchen help, accounts if you keep them." Mrs. Pike folded her arms. "Can you cook?" "Enough not to insult a stove." Alvin made a faint sound. Might be the ghost of amusement. And Edith felt herself soften before she had given permission. Mrs. Pike considered. "One night in the back room. You will wash linens after supper. If trouble comes to my door, it leaves with you. Thank you. Do not hurt me. Earn it." Edith nodded. She preferred that. Kindness with a price was safer than kindness with a smile and hidden teeth. Alvin remained on the porch as she started up the stairs. She paused halfway and looked back. "You did not have to speak for me. I did not speak for you. I spoke against Greer. That is almost the same." "No, ma'am. It is not." The ma'am stung. It put distance between them. "My bay." He meant it kindly. But Edith had been called ma'am by men who wanted her quiet and grateful. She lifted her chin. "You may go now, Mr. Vaughn. I am safely under a stern roof." His jaw tightened. "I meant no insult. Men seldom do when they decide where a woman belongs." She saw the words land harder than she intended. He nodded once, placed his hat back on his head, and stepped off the porch. Edith watched him leave through the lace curtain of the upper hall. He walked like a man used to carrying weight without asking if anyone saw it. Across the street, Silas Greer stood beneath the awning of the feed office, watching him too. That night, Edith scrubbed linens until her knuckles reddened. Mrs. Pike gave her stew in a tin bowl and half a biscuit gone hard at one edge. Edith ate alone on the back step, listening to the sounds of mercy, then settling into darkness. A horse clopped past. Somewhere a fiddle sought out a mournful tune from the saloon. The wind dragged dust along the alley like whispers. She thought of Alvin's auction notice. She thought of the bank draft hidden against her skin. $2,000. The number still seemed unreal. It had been left to her by Mr. Ambrose Wycliffe, an old and bitter man she had cared for during his last winter in Missouri. His relatives had called her servant, nuisance, charity case. He had called her the only person who warmed his tea before he asked. After he died, a lawyer had handed her the draft and warned her not to tell anyone until she knew whom to trust. Edith had trusted the mail. That had been her mistake. Silas Greer must have learned of the inheritance through some clerk, some loose tongue, some letter handled by greedy hands. He had written quickly, warmly, falsely. He had not wanted a wife. He had wanted a fortune with a woman attached. Edith pulled the bank draft from his hidden pocket under the cover of darkness, and held it in both hands. Moonlight made the paper look pale as bone. She could save herself with it. Could she save a stranger too? The next morning, she went to the station for her trunk. The station master would not meet her eyes. Trunk was claimed, he said. Claimed by whom? Man had papers. What man? He rubbed the back of his neck. Miss Dalton, I do not want trouble. You already have it. He glanced past her. Edith turned. Alvin Vaughn stood in the doorway, holding a coil of rope and a sack of nails. His expression darkened when he saw her face. What happened? My trunk is gone. The station master swallowed. Mr. Greer had a receipt. Edith stepped closer to the counter. Mr. Greer had no right. No, Mom, the station master said softly, but he had 2 men with him. Alvin set the nails down. Where did he take it? I cannot say. Alvin leaned one hand on the counter. He did not raise his voice. That made it worse. You can. The station master looked between them. Feed office. Back room. Edith turned for the door, but Alvin caught her elbow, not hard, just enough to stop her. No. She pulled free. Do not tell me no. You walk in there angry, and he will make it a scene. He stole from me. I believe you. That stopped her. No one had said that yet. Not Mrs. Pye, not the station master, not the people who watched yesterday. Alvin Vaughn said it plain, without ceremony. And Edith felt the words steady her. I can handle him, she said, my bay. But you should not have to handle him alone. Yesterday you kept distance. Today you are holding my arm. I was wrong to touch you. Yes. He removed his hand fully and stepped back. Then I will walk beside you, if you permit it. Edith studied him. He was try. Awkwardly, stiffly, like a man mending fence, with hands too cold to grip the wire. But trying. I permit it, she said. They crossed the street together. Silas Greer's feed office smelled of grain dust and cigar smoke. Her trunk sat in the back room, lock broken, lid open, clothes tossed like rags. Edith felt humiliation rise sharp in her throat. A woman's few private things were not much, but they were hers. Silas stood beside the desk, smiling, looking for this. Edith moved to the trunk. You had no right. You were promised to me. I am promised to no one. Silas' gaze slid to Alvin. Careful, Miss Dalton. A woman alone in a strange town should not be seen taking up with a man whose wife is barely cold in the ground. Alvin went still. Edith looked at him and saw the wound exposed. Wife, grave. The grief she had sensed now had a name. Silas saw it too and pressed harder. Did he tell you? Clara Vaughn died last winter with childbed fever. Baby too. Since then he lets cattle starve and fences fall, while he stares at the hills like God owes him an apology. Alvin's face turned ashen beneath the weathering. Edith stepped between them before thinking. Do not speak of the dead to shame the living. Silas laughed. Listen to her, plain as flour and proud as a queen. Edith's hands trembled. Give me back my trunk. Pay what you owe. I owe you nothing. You owe me obedience, if you know what is good for you. Alvin moved then, but Edith spoke first. No, the word cracked through the room. I crossed half the country being told what poor women must accept. I was told to be grateful for scrap, grateful for insult, grateful for any man who would take me. I am done with gratitude that tastes like dirt. Silas' smile vanished. Alvin looked at her as if seeing not a runaway, not a burden, not a woman in a torn dress, but someone standing in fire without stepping back. Edith closed the trunk as best she could. Mr. Vaughn, will you carry this outside? Alvin lifted the trunk in both arms. Silas stepped forward. You will regret this. Alvin's voice came low. I expect I will regret many things before I die. Carrying a woman's stolen trunk will not be one of them. They left the office with Silas watching from the doorway. Outside, Edith breathed in sunlight like she had been underwater. Thank you, she said. Alvin set the trunk down by the boardwalk. You defended my wife. I defended grief. His eyes lowered. Most folks are tired of mine. Then most folks are crueler than they know. He looked toward the hills beyond town. My ranch is 6 miles north. There is a roof, though it leaks. A kitchen, though it has forgotten company. Work. If you truly meant you can do accounts. Edith stared at him. He cleared his throat. I am not offering marriage. I am not offering charity. I need help sorting debt papers before the auction. You need wages and distance from Greer. Mrs. Pike can hold your room, or you can stay in the old wash house near my kitchen. It has a bolt inside. A bolt inside. The detail touched her more than any polished speech could have. You would trust me with your accounts. No, he said honestly, but I trust Greer less. This time. Edith did laugh softly. Alvin blinked, then looked away as if the sound troubled him. I will come for 1 week, she said. For wages, he agreed. And I keep the boat. You keep the boat. Vaughn Ranch looked like a tired animal trying to stand. The main house sat low against the prairie wind, its porch sagging at one corner, its shutters faded blue beneath sun and dust. The barn roof had lost shingles in 3 places. Fence lines leaned. A dry windmill turned with a squeak that sounded almost human. Beyond the yard, cattle moved thin and slow through brittle grass. Yet there were signs of care buried under neglect. The porch had been swept recently. The well rope was patched clean. A line of young cottonwoods had been planted near the creek bed, though half had died. Someone had tried to keep hope alive and failed one chore at a time. Edith stepped down from the wagon with her trunk in both hands before Alvin could lift it. He noticed but said nothing. A little girl stood at the kitchen door. She was perhaps 6, with brown hair braided unevenly and a solemn face too old for her years. She held a rag doll by one arm. This is Ruthie, Alvin said. Edith looked at him. Your daughter, my niece, my sister, left her with Clara and me 2 years back, then took sick in Abilene. She did not come home. Ruthie stared at Edith's torn glove. Are you the bride who ran away? Alvin closed his eyes. Edith crouched until she was closer to the child's height. Yes. Why? Because the man waiting for me wanted my money more than my company. Ruthie considered that. Uncle Alvin says money makes men show their teeth. Your uncle is right. Ruthie looked at Alvin. She talks plain. She does, Alvin said. Can she make biscuits? Edith smiled. I can try. That first evening, the kitchen became a battlefield of flour, smoke, and stubborn pride. Edith found the stove neglected but usable, the flour tin low, the salt jar full, and the lard nearly gone. Alvin tried to help by standing in the doorway and saying where things used to be. Clara kept the rolling pin in that drawer. Edith opened it and found horseshoe nails. He frowned. Might be the other drawer. That one has cartridges. He rubbed a hand over his face. I have not done much baking. I can see that. Ruthie giggled behind her doll. Edith made biscuits small and uneven, hard at the bottom but soft in the middle. Alvin ate 3 without complaint. Ruthie ate 2 with sorghum and announced they tasted like almost Sunday. After supper, Edith washed dishes while Alvin carried water. They moved around each other carefully. Strangers learning the boundaries of a room that once belonged to the dead. On the shelf near the stove sat a blue cup with a crack in the handle. Alvin's eyes went to it often. Edith did not touch it. Later, in the parlor, she spread his debt papers on the table. Receipts, cattle notes, feed bills, land tax, a mortgage bought by Silas Greer from a bank in Dodge. The numbers were harsh, but not hopeless. That surprised her. You do not owe as much as the auction notice suggests, she said. Alvin stood by the cold fireplace. Debt is debt, yes, but some of these charges are doubled. This feed bill appears twice with different dates. This interest is unlawful, unless you signed a separate agreement. I signed what they put in front of me after Clara died. Edith looked up. He was staring at the blue cup in the kitchen. I did not read much that winter, he said. Folks came by. Papers came by. Men said sign here if you want time. I wanted time. His voice roughened on the last word. Edith softened her own voice. Grief is expensive when cruel men find it. Alvin looked at her then. The lamplight showed the hollows beneath his eyes. You speak like you know. I know enough. He did not ask. She was grateful. Over the next days, life at Vaughn Ranch settled into a rhythm that did not yet call itself trust. Edith rose before dawn to help Ruthie dress and comb her hair. She made coffee strong enough to wake fence posts. Alvin went to the north pasture, returned with dust on his shoulders, and found Edith at the kitchen table sorting papers into piles. Valid, false, questionable, desperate. Ruthie followed Edith everywhere. At first she did it with suspicion, then with interest, then with the quiet devotion of a child who had been waiting for a woman's hands to know where ribbons were kept. Did you have a little girl back east? Ruthie asked one morning while Edith mended a tear in her pinafore. No. Did you want one? The needle paused. I never had a home long enough to think about it. Ruthie leaned against her knee. You can think about it here. Edith's throat tightened. I am only here for work. That is what Uncle Alvin says when he is scared. From across the room, Alvin nearly dropped the coffee pot. I am not scared, he said. Ruthie looked at Edith with grave patience. He is. Edith bent over the mending so neither of them would see her smile. Alvin's help remained imperfect. He left coins on the table for Edith's wages without meeting her eyes, as though paying her properly might offend her less than handing them to her. He offered her his coat one cold morning, but did it by hanging it on a fence post beside her, instead of placing it around her shoulders. You forgot your coat, she called after him. No, fence looked cold. She wore it anyway. It smelled of leather, hay, wood smoke, and the clean loneliness of open country. In town, rumors thickened. Edith learned this when she went with Alvin to purchase lamp oil and thread. At Hargrove's store, two women stopped speaking when she entered. Mr. Hargrove, the storekeeper, had a narrow face and fingers stained with tobacco. Mrs. Vaughn's blue thread used to be cheaper, Alvin said, looking at the shelf. Mrs. Vaughn paid on time, Hargrove replied. Edith saw Alvin flinch, almost too small to notice. She stepped forward. We need the blue thread, 2 pounds of flour, salt, lamp oil, and a ledger book. Hargrove looked her over. On his account, paid cash. That made him blink. Edith placed coins on the counter. Her wages returned to the household, in a way Alvin would not accept if she named it kindness. Hargrove picked up the coins. Heard you ran from Greer. I walked. Heard you had money hidden. Alvin turned sharply. Edith kept her face calm. If I did, I would not be counting pennies for threat. Hargrove smiled. Sometimes plain packages hold surprises. Alvin stepped close to the counter. Say what you mean or swallow it. The store went quiet. Hargrove lifted both hands. No offense meant, then none should be spoken. Edith looked at Alvin. No one had defended her name like that. Not loudly. Not in a way that caused standing in a town where standing mattered. She felt something move in her chest, cautious and warm. On the ride home, she said, "Thank you for what you said." He kept his eyes on the team. Hargrove has a mean mouth. You did not have to answer it. These are, Alvin said. I did. The wagon rolled beneath a sky, turning gold at the edges. That night, rain came. Not enough to save pasture, but enough to soften dust and make the roof speak in drips. Edith woke in the wash house to water tapping near her trunk. She moved it aside and opened the door. Across the yard, Alvin stood in the barn with a lantern, staring at something in his hands. She should have gone back to bed. Instead, she crossed through the rain. He did not hear her until she reached the barn door. I saw the light, she said. He held a small knitted booty, yellowed with age. Edith stopped. I was fixing the tack room roof, he said. Found a box Clara packed. The rain filled the silence. I can go, Edith whispered. No, the word was almost broken. So she stayed at the doorway, not coming too close. Alvin turned the booty in his hand. We had a name picked. Samuel if it was a boy, Grace if it was a girl. Ruthie wanted a brother, because she said sisters borrow ribbons. His mouth tried for a smile and failed. I was out with the cattle when fever came. I thought there would be time. There is always another hour until there is not. Edith's heart ached with the helplessness of it. You love them. I still do. That is not a sin. Feels like one when the living need me, and I keep looking at graves. Edith thought of Ruthie's uneven braids, the dying ranch, the papers signed in grief. My love for the dead and care for the living can sit at the same table. He looked at her then, rain silvering the dark behind him. Do you believe that? I am trying to. He nodded slowly. The next morning, Alvin fixed the washhouse roof before breakfast. He said nothing about the bar. Edith said nothing about the booty. But when she came into the kitchen, the blue cracked cup had been moved from the shelf to the table. Not put away, not worshipped from a distance, simply brought back among the living. Silas Greer returned to Vaughn Ranch on a Thursday afternoon with dust on his boots and law in his pocket. Edith saw him from the kitchen window. Alvin was in the south field with Ruthie riding beside him on the old mare. The ranch hands had dwindled to one gray-bearded man named Tobin, and he was mending fence too far off to hear a call. Silas came alone, which made Edith more afraid, not less. Men like him brought witnesses when they wanted theater. They came alone when they wanted truth hidden. She opened the kitchen door, but stayed inside the frame. You are not welcome here. Silas removed his hat and smiled. Not your house, not yours either. Soon enough, her hand moved to the bolt by habit. He saw it, still running from doors. Edith. She hated that he used her first name. It made the past week feel invaded. What do you want? To make you a sensible offer before this gets uglier. It is already ugly, only because you insist on standing beside a man who cannot save himself. Silas glanced around the yard. Look at this place. Dead grass, broken barn, a widower half mad with sorrow. That child will be hungry by winter. Leave Ruthie out of your mouth. His smile sharpened. There is the temper. You hid it well in your letters. I wrote to a widower seeking a wife, not a thief seeking a purse. Silas stepped closer. Edith did not move, though every nerve told her to. I know about the Wycliffe money, he said softly. The world narrowed to his face. Not all of it, she said, because denial seemed useless. Enough! You think hiding paper under your dress makes you clever? Banks talk, clerks drink, lawyers boast when they think women do not understand numbers. Edith's skin went cold. Silas leaned near the doorframe. Marry me, and I will let Vaughn keep his house as a tenant. Refuse me, and I will make sure every man from here to Abilene knows a lone woman is carrying a fortune. How long do you think you will keep it then? Edith heard Alvin's wagon in the distance. Still too far. You cannot force marriage. No, Silas said, but I can force fear. Most women choose a husband when the alternative is wolves. He reached into his coat and took out a folded paper. This is a petition questioning your inheritance. Claims undue influence over an old dying man. Claims immoral conduct. Claims theft by manipulation. I have 3 Wycliffe cousins ready to sign and swear you are a servant girl who tricked a feeble mind. Edith's throat closed. Plain, poor, unwanted, broken. She had heard every version, but thief, that cut deep, because kindness had been the only thing she owned before the money. Those are lies, she whispered. Truth is what respectable men agree to repeat. A sound came from the yard. Alvin stood near the water trough, Ruthie behind him on the mare. He had returned quietly, reins in hand, face pale with controlled anger. Then I will repeat this, Alvin said. You threaten her again, and I will take that paper to Judge Bell myself. Silas folded the petition. Judge Bell owes me. Not enough to put his name on fraud. You think you can prove fraud before the auction? You think this town will stand with a runaway bride and a rancher who let his wife die?" Alvin flinched as if struck. Edith walked out of the kitchen then, rage burning through fear. "She died fever, not neglect, not lack of love, fever. You know it, and every person in Mercy Bend knows it. If they let you use a dead woman as a whip, then shame belongs to them, not him." Ruthie began to cry silently on the mare. Alvin heard it. His face changed at once. The anger fell behind something deeper. He lifted Ruthie down and held her close. "Silas saw that too. Soft," he said. "That has always been your trouble, Vaughn. Too soft to keep a wife alive. Too soft to keep a ranch. Too soft to see this woman as buying your pity with stolen money." Alvin handed Ruthie to Edith. "Take her inside," he said. Edith did. Through the window, she saw Alvin stand before Silas. No fists were thrown. No gun was drawn. It was worse. It was two men facing each other with the future of a home between them. Silas left laughing. Alvin did not come in for a long while. That evening, Edith found him near the family cemetery on the rise behind the house. Two wooden crosses stood beneath a cottonwood. Clara Vaughn and infant son. The grass around them had been kept clear. Alvin held his hat in both hands. "I should send you away," he said, without turning. Edith stopped a few paces behind him. "Because he threatened me, because he is right about one thing. Trouble grows near me. I brought trouble with me, and I let it under my roof. You offered a bolt inside the door. That is not enough. It was more than most." He looked at the graves. "Clara used to say I treated sorrow like weather. Put my head down and waited for it to pass. But some storms do not pass. They move in." Edith came beside him, leaving a respectful space. "Tell me about her." He looked surprised. "You do not have to," she said. "No, it might be time somebody asked before telling me to stop grieving." So he told her. Clara had laughed loudly in church and sung softly in the barn. She had been patient with Ruthie, impatient with crooked seams, and certain that Alvin's serious face hid a foolish heart with boots on. She planted cottonwoods because she wanted shade for children not yet born. She made coffee weak enough to insult a spoon. Edith listened until the sun dropped low. Then Alvin said, "When she died, I thought God had taken my chance at being any good. I looked at Ruthie and saw only who I had failed to protect. I looked at the ranch and saw the room where Clara was not. Greer came with papers. I signed. Hargrove came with bills. I ignored them. Men offered help. I refused. I told myself I was being strong. Truth is, I was letting everything die slower than she did." Edith's eyes stung. "You are not dead, Alvin." It was the first time she had used his given name. He heard it. She saw him hear it. "No," he said quietly. "I suppose not." She reached into her dress and removed the hidden bank draft. The paper trembled in her hand. Alvin stared at it. This is mine. Lawfully mine. Mr. Wycliffe left it because I cared for him when his blood kin would not sit beside his bed. Silas knows. He wants it. If I use it to pay your debt, he loses hold of the ranch." Alvin stepped back. "No, you have not heard the terms. I heard enough. You need money. I need many things. I will not take a woman's whole future because she feels sorry for my dad. It is not pity. What is it then?" Edith's answer caught in her chest. Trust, anger, hope, a longing for a place where she could be more than a rumor, with a fortune sewn under her dress. A child's head against her knee. A cracked blue cup returned to the table. A man hanging his coat on a fence post because he did not yet know how to offer warmth without fear. "I do not know all of it yet," she said. Alvin's face softened and pained at once. He took off his gloves slowly. "Then we wait until you do. The auction is in 3 days. Then I will fight another way. You have no other way. I have cattle to sell. Too thin. Land parcel, mortgage it. Men who owe me. And Greer owns their debts too. He looked away. Edith stepped closer. Let me help. I buried a wife who trusted me. I will not bury your freedom too. My freedom is the right to choose what I do with what is mine. Not while Greer has a knife at your back. Not stand beside me when I choose. The words stayed between them, larger than either could explain. At last Alvin said, tomorrow we ride to Judge Bell. We show him the false charges on my debt and the threat against your inheritance. We do it in daylight, with Ruthie and Mrs. Pikes and Tobin as witness. No secrets. Edith folded the draft and held it tight. No secrets, she agreed. But that night, Silas struck first. By morning, the town believed Edith Dalton had stolen her fortune from a dying man and come to Mercy Bend to buy herself a husband. The church bell rang at 10, though it was not Sunday. In Mercy Bend, that meant public business. A land sale, a judgment, a debt called before witnesses so no man could later claim ignorance. Edith stood at the edge of the crowd beside Alvin Vaughn, wearing her mended gray dress and the only bonnet she had left. Ruthie held her hand. The child's fingers were cold. The auction platform had been built from wagon planks in front of the courthouse. Judge Bell sat behind a table, his face troubled. Mr. Hargrove stood near Silas Greer, whispering into every ear that leaned close. Silas wore his best coat. That frightened Edith more than a weapon. He expected victory. On the table lay the debt papers. Beside them lay a petition against Edith. Judge Bell cleared his throat. We are gathered concerning the foreclosure sale of Vaughn Ranch. Creditor Silas Greer holding note. A separate matter has been raised questioning funds allegedly held by Miss Edith Dalton, lately arrived. A murmur moved through the crowd. Alvin leaned toward Edith. You do not have to stand here, Is, she said. I do. Silas stepped forward. Your Honor, before any payment is offered, the town must know whether Miss Dalton possesses lawful money or stolen property. I have statements from the Wycliffe family indicating suspicion. Judge Bell adjusted his spectacles. Suspicion is not proof, no, but enough to delay any transfer. That delay would serve you. Silas smiled. Justice often serves the patient. Edith felt Ruthie's hand tighten. Then Hargrove spoke from the crowd. A woman who runs from one marriage bed to another man's ranch ought to answer some questions. Alvin's head turned. Edith touched his sleeve. Let me. He looked down at her. For a moment, she saw the fight in him. He wanted to stand in front of her, take every word, break every mouth that shaped them. But that would make her small again, hidden behind a man's anger. Slowly, he stepped half a pace aside. Edith walked forward alone. Her knees trembled. The whole town watched. Dust moved around her boots. Somewhere a baby fussed and was hushed. My name is Edith Dalton, she said. I came here to marry Silas Greer because his letters described a decent home and motherless children. I ran when he broke into my trunk and demanded money he had no right to claim. Silas laughed. Pretty speech. Edith turned toward him. You will have your turn. A few men muttered approval. Judge Bell lifted one eyebrow. Edith removed the bank draft from the hidden pocket in her bodice. Gasps spread as the paper appeared. This money was left to me by Ambrose Wycliffe of St. Louis. I nursed him, read to him, and kept his house when his family stopped visiting, except to ask what he meant to leave behind. He signed this with witnesses. His lawyers sealed it. I have the letter of transfer. She drew another folded paper from her sleeve. Silas' face changed. Edith saw it and knew. He had counted on shame, making her silent. He had counted on her hiding the fortune so long, the suspicion would grow around it like mold. Judge Bell held out his hand. My, I see those. Edith gave them to him. The judge read slowly. The crowd waited. Alvin stood still, but Edith felt his presence like a wall behind her, not blocking her, not owning her, simply there. Judge Bell looked up. This letter appears lawful. Silas stepped forward. "It could be forged," a voice called from the back. "It is not." Everyone turned. Mrs. Pike came through the crowd wearing a black bonnet and an expression that made men move aside. Beside her walked the station master, Tobin, and a thin man with a traveling coat, dusty from hard riding. Judge Bell squinted. "Mr. Kavanaugh." The thin man bowed. "Samuel Kavanaugh, attorney for the estate of Ambrose Wycliffe." Mrs. Pike sent a telegram when Miss Dalton came under threat. "I arrived on the morning train." Edith nearly swayed. Mrs. Pike met her eyes, stern as ever. "I told you locks keep men out. Telegrams do better." Mr. Kavanaugh took the papers. "The transfer is lawful. Miss Dalton is the sole recipient of $2,000, free of claim. Furthermore, Mr. Greer visited my office 3 weeks ago, asking whether a husband might control such funds upon marriage." The crowd erupted. Silas shouted, "That proves nothing." "It proves intent," Mr. Kavanaugh said. "And if the lady wishes, it begins a complaint." Judge Bell's face had gone hard. "We will address that after the sale matter." Edith turned to Alvin. This was the choice. If she paid the debt publicly, she could save the ranch, but bind herself to gossip forever. They would say she bought him. They would say Alvin took her money because grief made him weak. They would say Ruthie called a stranger mother because a fortune entered the kitchen. If she did not, the ranch would be sold, and Silas would win by another road. Alvin walked to her then. He did not touch her until he asked with his eyes. She gave the smallest nod. He took her hand, not as a claim but as a promise of steadiness. "Judge Bell," he said, voice carrying over the crowd, "before Miss Dalton makes any decision, I want it known that I will not accept her money as charity, purchase, or bride price." Silas sneered. "Then you are finished." Alvin ignored him. "I have reviewed the debt papers with Miss Dalton. Charges were doubled. Interest falsely added. Fee never delivered was billed. I asked the court to examine the note before any sale." Judge Bell nodded. "I intend to." Edith looked up at Alvin, startled. "You said we had no time." "We had enough for you to teach me how to read what grief made me sigh." Mr. Kavanaugh examined the papers. So did Judge Bell. It took nearly an hour. The crowd shifted in the sun, restless but unwilling to leave drama half-cooked. At last Judge Bell struck the table with his palm. "This foreclosure is suspended. The debt amount is under legal question. Mr. Greer, you will surrender the original note to this court." Silas went red. "You cannot." "I can, and I do." The first cheer came from Tobin, then the station master, then others, cautious at first, then stronger. But Silas was not done. He lunged toward Edith, not with a gun, but with his hand reaching for the bank draft. Alvin moved fast. He caught Silas by the wrist and twisted him down against the platform. Men shouted. Ruthie cried out. Judge Bell stood. Silas struggled. "That money should have been mine." Alvin's voice was low enough that only those nearest heard it. "No woman is yours because you wrote her name on a promise." The sheriff pushed through and took Silas from Alvin's grip. Hargrove tried to slip away, but Mrs. Pike blocked him with her umbrella. "Oh no," she said. "You have been speaking all morning. Stay and listen now." By afternoon, the truth had spread across Mercy Bend. Greer had inflated debts, stolen Edith's trunk, threatened legal lies, and tried to trap her into marriage for her fortune. Hargrove had helped by repeating rumors and overcharging accounts. Judge Bell ordered the ranch sale, delayed pending correction of the debt. Silas was held for theft and fraud. Hargrove's store emptied faster than a rain barrel in August. When it was done, Edith sat on the courthouse steps with Ruthie, asleep against her side. Alvin stood before her, hat turning in his hands. "You saved my name," he said. She gave a tired smile. "You saved mine first. Not enough. Enough to make me stand." He looked out toward the street, where people now pretended they had never doubted her. "I am sorry for every time I thought distance was the same as respect. You were learning. I am still. Am I? He sat beside her, leaving a careful space. After a moment, Ruthie's sleeping hand reached for him. He took it. Edith looked at their joined hands and felt something inside her, long guarded, begin to lay down its weapon. I still want to help with the ranch, she said. Alvin turned. Ask bookkeeper. For wages. His mouth softened. For wages. And perhaps as investor, if the terms are fair. He blinked. She held up one hand. Not charity. Not purchase. A proper agreement. The ranch needs water, seed, cattle, roof work, and time. I have money sitting scared in paper. Land might teach it courage. For the first time since she had met him, Alvin Vaughn smiled fully. It changed his whole face. Edith Dalton, he said, you talk like a woman who intends to boss my ranch. Our ranch records. She corrected. He laughed once, quiet and surprised, as if the sound had come from a room he had forgotten existed. Spring did not come all at once to Vaughn Ranch. It came in repairs. A roof patched before the next rain. A fence line straightened. A new ledger opened with clean pages and honest sums. A well crew hired from 2 towns over. 3 healthy milk cows bought at fair price. Seed ordered without Hargrove's hand in the account. Edith insisted everything be written properly. She and Alvin signed an agreement before Judge Bell. Her money would pay corrected debts and improvements in exchange for a share of ranch profits, until the investment returned. Alvin insisted her name be on every paper. Edith insisted Ruthie learn to read the numbers too. No one cheats a woman who can count, Edith said. Ruthie frowned over the ledger. Then I will count better than everybody. Alvin, standing behind her chair, said, that is a worthy ambition. Mercy Ben changed more slowly than the ranch. Some folks apologized. Some did it well. Some did it poorly. The station master came first, hat crushed in both hands. Miss Dalton, I should have stopped Greer taking your trunk. Yes, Edith said. He looked miserable. She let silence do its work, then added, next time a frightened woman asks for help, remember how heavy a trunk can be when no one lifts a hand. He nodded. I will. Mrs. Pike apologized in her own manner by arriving with curtains for the wash house and saying, that little room is unfit for a woman with sense. Edith accepted the curtains. Thank you. I was not being kind. I was being accurate. Of course. They smiled at each other. Mr. Hargrove lasted 3 weeks before coming to the ranch with a wagon of flour, coffee, and blue thread. Alvin met him in the yard. Edith came out, wiping her hands on an apron. Hargrove removed his hat. His narrow face seemed smaller without arrogance holding it up. Miss Dalton, Mr. Vaughn, I spoke wrong. Alvin crossed his arms. Wrong is when a man says rain and means snow. You spoke cruel. Hargrove swallowed. I spoke cruel. Edith studied him. Why? He blinked. Why? Yes. Tell me why, or take your goods back. He looked down at the reins. Because Greer's account kept my store breathing. Because I feared crossing him. Because repeating his words was easier than standing against them. Edith appreciated truth more than performance. Fear makes cowards of many, she said. But cowardice still sends a bill. Hargrove nodded. I brought supplies at cost, and an account correction. I overcharged the Vaughn place for near a year. Alvin's jaw flexed. Edith took the paper. We will review it. I expect that. As he climbed onto the wagon, Ruthie came out holding her doll. Mr. Hargrove. He paused. My Aunt Edith is not plain as flour. Edith's heart stopped at the word aunt. Hargrove looked at the child, then at Edith. No, Miss Ruthie, she is not. After he left, Edith went into the barn and cried behind the stacked hay, where no one would see. Alvin found her anyway. He stood at the entrance to the stall. I can go. No, she wiped her face. I am tired of crying alone. He came in slowly. She called me Aunt. Edith whispered. I heard. I know it is a small thing. It is not. He sat on an overturned bucket across from her. Dust drifted gold in the afternoon light. I fear wanting it, Edith said. A place, her trust, your table. I fear wanting it so badly that if it is taken, I will become someone I do not know how to carry. Alvin looked at his hands. After Clara died, I thought wanting again would betray her. Then you came into my kitchen and burned biscuits and moved numbers around like soldiers. And Ruthie started laughing in the mornings. I began to understand something I should have known sooner. What? That love is not a grave with only room for one name. Edith's tears fell again. Quieter now. Alvin reached into his pocket and took out the small knitted booty he had found months before. He held it carefully. I keep this, he said, not because I am trapped there, because that child was loved. Clara was loved. Loving you would not erase them. Edith could barely breathe. He looked up. But I will not ask anything from gratitude. Not because you saved the ranch. Not because Ruthie needs you. Not because the town owes you respect. If I ever ask, it will be because you are Edith Dalton. And I would choose you if you came with no fortune, no trunk, no good opinion from anyone. Her hand trembled as she reached across the space between them. He took it. There was no kiss then. Not in the hay dust. Not with grief and hope sitting so close. There was only his tomb resting gently over her knuckles, asking nothing more than to remain. Summer came greener than anyone expected. The new well found water. The cottonwoods Clara had planted put out leaves. Tobin said the ranch had remembered its own name. Ruthie learned to make round biscuits and declared Edith's first attempt a historical hardship. Alvin laughed so hard he had to leave the kitchen. Silas Greer was tried in the county seat. The Wycliffe lawyer saw to the inheritance matter, and the false petition collapsed under the weight of its own lies. Greer's holdings were sold to settle claims, including money owed back to Vaughn Ranch. Mercy Ben spoke of justice for a while, as towns do when shame has passed close enough to make everyone straighten their collars. Edith did not attend the trial. She stayed at the ranch, balanced accounts, planted beans, and helped Ruthie sew a new dress for the church picnic. On the morning of the picnic, Edith stood before the small mirror in the washhouse, tying her bonnet with nervous hands. The room had changed. Curtains at the window, a braided rug, a shelf Alvin built without mentioning it, exactly the right height for her books. The bolt remained inside the door, though she no longer used it unless the wind rattled hard. A knock came. Edith? Alvin called. She opened the door. He stood in a clean shirt, hair combed, hat held low. Ruthie peeked from behind him wearing a yellow ribbon. You look pretty, Ruthie said. Edith smiled. So do you. Alvin said nothing. Edith looked at him, suddenly uncertain. Ai, something wrong? No. His voice was rough. Nothing wrong, Ruthie rolled her eyes with the deep impatience of childhood. Uncle Alvin, say it proper. He cleared his throat. You look beautiful, Edith. Warmth rose in her face. Thank you. At the church picnic, people greeted her differently. Not all with warmth, but with respect. And that was a bridge worth crossing. Mrs. Pike handed her lemonade. Judge Bell asked about the well. The station master introduced her to his wife as the lady who taught Mercy Ben a lesson in courage, which embarrassed Edith enough that Alvin quietly took the cup from her hand before she spilled it. After the meal, a commotion rose near the church steps. A young woman had arrived by stage, pale with travel and holding a letter. Beside her stood a man from the stage line, impatient to unload baggage. The woman's eyes moved across the crowd with a frightened look. Edith knew too well. She came for Hargrove's nephew, Mrs. Pike whispered. But he left town last week. The young woman heard enough to understand. Her face crumpled. Somebody muttered, "Another mail order mistake." The words struck Edith like an old bruise. She set down her lemonade and walked across the churchyard. Dust lifted around her shoes. Townspeople watched. Alvin did not stop her. He came beside her, close enough to stand with her but not ahead. Edith reached the young woman and held out her hand. "My name is Edith Dalton," she said. You are not a mistake. The young woman stared at her. Edith turned to the stage man. Bring her trunk down gently. He opened his mouth to argue. Alvin looked at him once, and the trunk came down gently. Mrs. Pike approached, already sighing. I suppose my back room is empty. Edith smiled. It has a good lock, and a better telegram office nearby, Mrs. Pike said. The town laughed softly, not cruelly this time. Alvin watched Edith as she helped the woman toward the shade. Later, when the picnic thinned and Ruthie ran with other children between the cottonwoods, he found Edith near the church fence. You saw yourself, he said. I saw someone who should not have to become me before being believed. He nodded. The sun lowered, turning the prairie gold beyond the churchyard. Alvin rested his hands on the fence rail. I have been waiting for the right time, he said. Edith's heart began to pound. I told myself I would wait until the ranch was stronger. Then until the trial ended. Then until Ruthie seemed ready. Truth is, I was afraid. Ruthie said you were. She is a merciless child. She is a nursed one. He smiled, then turned serious. Edith Dalton, I love you. I love the way you stand when people expect you to shrink. I love the way you count every penny and still spend mercy freely. I love that you speak to Ruthie like her thoughts matter. I love that you let Clara's cup stay on the table and never once asked me to hide my dead to make room for the living. Edith's eyes filled. I cannot offer a perfect house, he said. The porch still leans. The barn roof will likely test my patience until Judgment Day. I cannot offer a heart with no scars, but I can offer truth, work, faithfulness, and a name I will defend as long as I draw a breath. Not because you need defending, because it would be my honor to stand beside you while you defend yourself. Edith looked toward Ruthie, who was pretending not to watch from behind a cottonwood. Then she looked back at Alvin. I came west because I thought any home would be better than none, she said. Then I learned a bad home is another kind of hunger. At your ranch, I found work, then shelter, then a child who trusted me with ribbons, then a man who learned to ask before touching my arm. He lowered his eyes with a humble smile. I love you too, Alvin Vaughn, she said. Not because you were whole when I met you, because you were broken and still chose not to be cruel. He took her hand. This time, when he leaned close, she met him halfway. Their kiss was gentle, steady, and witnessed by a little girl who shouted, finally, loud enough for half the picnic to hear. They married in September beneath the cottonwoods at Vaughn Ranch. Edith wore a cream dress sewn by Mrs. Pike and Ruthie, with blue thread hidden in the hem for luck. Alvin wore his best black coat. Tobin stood as witness and cried openly, daring any man to mention it. Judge Bell performed the vows. The young woman from the church picnic, now working safely at Mrs. Pike's, played a hymn on a borrowed fiddle. Before the ceremony, Alvin took Edith to the family cemetery. Clara's cross had been sanded clean. The baby's marker stood beside it. Fresh wildflowers rested at both. Edith placed a hand on Alvin's arm. Thank you for bringing me here. I wanted no part of my life hidden from you. She looked at the graves. Then let mine be known too. I was poor. I was unwanted by people who measured worth badly. I was nearly trapped by a man who saw a fortune and not a soul. But I am not ashamed anymore. Alvin covered her hand with his. Good. After the vows, Ruthie slipped between them and took both their hands. Does this mean Aunt Edith is more than aunt now? Edith knelt in the grass. Only if you want that? Ruthie's mouth trembled. Can I call you Mama, Edith? Not instead of anybody. Just because my heart wants to. Edith pulled her close, tears falling freely. Yes, not instead of anybody. Just because your heart wants to. Alvin bent over them both, his hand resting gently on Edith's shoulder, his face turned toward the cottonwoods Clara had planted. That evening, lanterns glowed along the porch. The repaired roof held firm above laughter and fiddle music. Neighbors ate at long tables made from planks. that once formed an auction platform. Alvin had bought them after the courthouse replaced it, and Edith had insisted they be used for a wedding feast. "Let shame become supper," she had said. So it did. Mrs. Pike raised a glass of lemonade to Miss Edith Vaughn, who arrived with one valise and more backbone than the rest of us combined. Tobin added, and to Alvin, who finally learned when a woman says she can handle trouble, a wise man saddles up beside her and keeps quiet unless needed. Laughter rolled warm through the dusk. Alvin looked at Edith across the table, and she saw no shock in his eyes now, no disbelief that a runaway bride had saved his dying ranch with a hidden fortune. The shock had become gratitude. The gratitude had become respect. The respect had become love. Later, after the guests left, and Ruthie fell asleep with cake crumbs on her sleeve, Edith stood with Alvin on the porch. The ranch spread before them under moonlight. Cattle lowed in the distance. The new well creaked softly. The cottonwoods whispered in the night wind, alive and growing. Alvin placed his coat around Edith's shoulders, not on a fence post this time. She smiled. "You are getting bolder." I asked with my eyes. "You did, and I said yes." He stood beside her, shoulder touching hers. "I used to think this place was dying," he said. "It was waiting for rain, for truth, for work, for a child's laugh, for someone to read the papers, for you to forgive yourself enough to live here again." He looked at her. "And for you?" Edith leaned against him. "For me to stop running." The prairie wind moved over the repaired porch, over the barn, over Clara's cottonwoods and Ruthie's sleeping window, over the land that had nearly been sold to cruelty and instead had become a home. Edith Dalton had arrived in Mercy Bend covered in dust, judged by strangers, hunted for her fortune, and named a runaway before anyone asked what she had run from. Alvin Vaughn had stood beside an auction notice, grieving what he could not save, and certain life had no mercy left for him. But the West had a way of testing souls in public and healing them in quiet places. A defended name, an offered coat, a ledger made honest, a child's trust, a vow spoken beneath trees planted by love that came before and blessed what came after. And when dawn rose over Vaughn Ranch the next morning, Edith stepped onto the porch with Ruthie's hand in hers and Alvin waiting by the gate, and she knew at last that a woman could carry a hidden fortune across 1,000 miles and still discover the richest thing waiting for her was a place where she no longer had to hide.